process. So when I work with clients or individuals on this process of strengthening your personal brand, I take them through 4 steps. And we're going to touch on each of these from really high level today. I'm going to cover a lot of information. I encourage you, if you're in a place where you can take notes, feel free to take notes. But I want to let you know too that we are recording this session specifically for HRA TV use, so you can go back and listen to it. I'm also going to send a follow-up. I'm going to be mentioning some books throughout this time together, and you don't have to try to write them down or anything. I'm going to send you a follow-up, which is a reading list, and also a one-sheet resource that will help take you through some of these steps. So it's going to be a lot of information, but don't feel like you have to try to capture it all right now. Just kind of soak it in. So the 4 steps that I take people through in the personal branding process is 1, discovering more about who you are. A lot of times I will have clients come to me and they will say, I really need help getting clarity on my next step. I'm making a decision between this path or this path, and I'm just not sure which path to take. Or they'll say, I'm in a position where I'm not really fulfilled. I don't know that I'm really using my gifts or talents, but I just have no idea what my next step should be. And so a lot of times I'll have people come to me looking for help on vision and direction. But before we ever talk about vision, direction, and goals, we take a step back and we start here, because this is really the foundation that informs everything else. So we're going to spend a good chunk of time in this session together on this step 1, because this is really a key part in figuring out and clarifying and then strengthening your own personal brand. But the second step is, once you go through all that work of figuring out, okay, I'm clear on who I am, it's so important to check in and assess, who are you to other people? What is your reputation? Does your self-perception match your reputation? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. The third step is tell who you are. And that's where you take a look at all of the different ways that you communicate your personal brand. So many different ways, from email to in person, all of the different ways. And that's where you look at, how am I showing up and telling others who I am? And then the last is give who you are. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. That is where you are living out your brand and adding value and bringing who you uniquely are to be able to do that and add value in the lives of others. So we'll talk about that as well. So with that, let's start with step 1. It really starts with the roots, right? And so this is the part where you really dig in. And again, I encourage you to put that lens on yourself and really think about who you are, because this is the foundation that informs everything else and holds everything else up. And the way that I do that when I work with people, you'll see 5 things on the slide here. I'm going to touch on each of these from a high level, but then I'm going to drill down. We're going to go a little bit deeper into 2 of these so you can see how this works. And then this is the area where I'm going to send you a follow-up email, and I have a one-sheet resource, which will take you through, point you to different resources and steps that you can take in each of these areas so that you can come back and finish this step. Because again, this step 1 of discovering more about who you are is really the most important part about strengthening your personal brand. So in this process of discovering more about who you are, and of course there are other ways that you can discover more about who you are. These are the 5 things that I use to work with clients, and I found them very effective. But the first is to really know your values. A lot of times we say, oh yeah, no, I know what my values are, but we oftentimes don't sit down, name them, write them out. And the reason it's so important to do that, and I encourage you to really narrow it down to about 3 core values, is because when we're living out of alignment with our values, that is typically when we feel the most tension and the most stress. So it's super, super important. This is actually where I start with people is, identify your core values. What are the things that are non-negotiables in your life? What are the things that define your character and that you hold dear to your heart? So that's a starting place, is values. The second is strengths. What are your natural gifts and abilities? And I know all of you are probably very familiar with strengths assessments and all of those different things, but we are going to spend some time digging into strengths, because again, I want to put the lens back on you and your strengths. So we're going to come back to that one. The other is passions. This is an area that I find so often we ignore, we gloss over. If I were to ask you, what are you passionate about? What would you say? And so I really encourage you to think about, in your life, what are the things that light you up? What are the things that when you're doing them, time just flies? What are the things that you think about the night before because you're excited about it, or after you do them, you kind of still think about it because it was so enjoyable for you to do? So really think about what you're passionate about. And I encourage you, write down 3 professional passions, 3 things that just fire you up and excite you professionally, maybe in the role that you have now. But also, what are 3 of your personal passions? Because we are whole people. And so don't neglect that part, whether it's traveling or, and I know we're not able to really do that now, but cooking, music, whatever that might be for you. And the reason it's so important is if we want to live passionate lives, and we want to be able to spend time on the things that excite us and thrill us and, make time fly when we're doing them, we need to be intentional about making time for them because we are all so busy. So when you name them and you really know what you're passionate about, it helps you to be more intentional. And if you don't know what you're passionate about, I just encourage you to test some things out. Try new things, because that's a great way to just discover some passions. The 4th step within this phase 1 of discovering more about who you are that I work with people on is this area of experiences. And we're actually going to talk about this in just a minute because this is so important. But we all go through experiences, and sometimes we don't really stop and look at those experiences and say, how did that shape me? How did that change me? What did I learn from that? And so we're going to come back to that one in just a minute. And then skills, what are the skills that you've acquired, the things that you've learned that differentiate you from others? Because that helps to shape your personal brand as well. So I know that's a lot. We're going to drill